You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life.
The point is to understand yourself, who you really are. Humans are now hackable animals. To hack a human being means to understand that human better than he or she understands themselves. Facing enormous challenges, unprecedented challenges.
Welcome to the Spellbreakers Podcast, helping you transcend psyops, mental spells, and even reality itself, with your host, Donny Spellbreaker. Have you ever had a very productive day where you're in a flow state, where everything just seems to be working out perfectly? You're super productive, you're on the ball, you're creative, you're knocking off that old to-do list, you call an old friend, you start a new little business, you learn something new. Amazing. Now imagine if billions of people were living this way every single day. Imagine what we could accomplish. Imagine what we could achieve together. And one reason that we're not doing this is energy traps. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Spellbreakers Podcast. This is your boy Donny Spellbreaker. And today we got a good one for you. We're going to be discussing the concept of energy traps. It's a pretty large topic, but we're going to dip our toe in and see what we come up with. So when we hear the term energy traps, what do we think about? Well, for me, I think about the siphoning of energy from places like social media or the news, and just generally speaking, dramatic circumstances. But this concept is a lot more subtle and a lot more important. So today I'm going to hope to do it justice and to really open your eyes the way my eyes have been opened to this concept and phenomenon that we all have in our lives. So what is an energy trap? Essentially, it is an environment where your energy, whatever that might be, mental, psychological, physical, emotional, or spiritual, is siphoned off. Now, I'm sure all of us think of ways in society that this is happening. For example, social media and technology in general is definitely an energy trap. I looked it up and they say the average American spends about 5 to 6 hours a day on their phones. And so this actually translates into about 1,800 hours per year per person, which is pretty shocking. That's nearly a full-time job that we are all spending on our devices. Now, not every time we go on our devices is bad. Of course, there's many aspects of technology and the internet that really does benefit us, like connecting with old friends, learning something new, learning a new skill set. But if we're honest with ourselves, this is typically a fraction of the overall time we're spent on our devices. Usually we're scrolling social media in an endless doom loop and trapped up in today's biggest dramas. So for every person doing that, they're spending about 1,800 hours per year. If you extrapolate this to the North American population, that's over 62 million years per year wasted on devices, which is incredible. I mean, just think of yourself personally. What could you achieve if you were given 62 million years? Probably a lot. And I always wonder, what could we achieve as a population if we put the phones down and really tried to build something new? It's incredible to think about. One thing I've realized about the human experience and humans in general is that I do believe by nature we are largely good, productive, hardworking, community-oriented people. Now, not all of us are, quite the opposite, but I think that's where we thrive as individuals. But I think there are many traps that are set up for us in the world that will siphon our energy and limit our potential as creatures. In addition to this, things like trauma are also massive barriers for us to actually overcome and to self-actualize. It's almost like a weight, spiritually speaking, that is on our shoulders at all time, that's weighing us down, almost like a beach ball being held underwater. I think we are the beach ball and our nature is to float above it, being happy, healthy, productive members of society, if you will. But there clearly are forces that are holding us down. Now, if you've been tuning into past episodes, my message very much is that most of the so-called tyranny that we face in the world is largely due to us, either individually or collectively, opting in, whether that be with our support or our time or our energy. It's due to us buying into something that we can almost always opt out of. Now, today we'll add a little bit of a twist to that in this concept of energy traps, namely that all of the things that we buy into, we do buy into for a reason. We're not always just acting like unconscious sheep in the ways that truthers portray most of society. The reason why we buy into things is because they give us something. And it's often immediate and very gratifying. If we liken this concept to, say, drug addiction, so the first time somebody does drugs, they feel elated. They get very high. Everything feels incredible. A lot of their worries and concerns wipe away, and with things like hard drugs, they'll reach a euphoria that they often will never reach again, at least to the same intensity. And the first time they participate, they're not addicted. There's very little trade-offs, at least perceptually. But the positive is ingrained upon them. They want it again and again and again. And so each time they take a given substance, the actual effect is slightly less and slightly less. It's still good, it's still rewarding, but it's slightly less, just a little bit each time. And on the flip side, the cost to that, what's being taken away from the person, is slightly more and slightly more and slightly more. And obviously this isn't applied to all drugs, but you guys get where I'm going. And so eventually you hit a point when the costs outweigh the benefits. And it's often imperceptible. There's almost no one moment when you can pinpoint to say, yes, this is the moment when things all went bad. Now, energy traps are very much the same. Many of the energy traps we engage in are set up either by others or by ourselves to reward us in some way. And the trade-offs, at least at first, is not that much. It's just a few moments of your time. Now, we can see this with social media. Let's start there. When we first found social media, or was even given a smartphone, it was incredible. All of the things that you can do, all of the knowledge, all of the things happening, our brains aren't meant to handle that level of stimulation. And so it's hyper exciting. If you think about it in historical or evolutionary context, this is the first time in the history of our species, maybe, for your Tartarian guys out there, that we've had such an abundance of knowledge and information and stimulation at our fingertips. So we go down that path, right? We start scrolling more and more, signing up for multiple platforms, and soon enough we get hooked. Now, I'd argue almost all of us are hooked, even if you're using these as tools for empowerment. The stimulation, the endless new novelty will constantly trigger our reward cycles. But as we all know, more and more you get less and less of a dopamine hit. And more we feel like we're wasting our time, wasting our energy, and that the payoff isn't worth the cost in our lives. But then we feel trapped. Either some current event or drama is playing out and we can't look away and we feel the need to engage, but we want to get out in another part of us. And this is because we've been hooked into an energy trap where we're still getting something out of it, a hit of dopamine or validation in some respect. But that hit is far lower than the actual negative consequences of the time sucked. This is the core issue with energy traps, in that it's something that at first rewards you quite significantly, and there's virtually no downside. But slowly, gradually, as you move down further and further, you get less upside and you get more downside. And another issue with social media is that we as humans have what's called a negativity bias, meaning negative, divisive information triggers our reward centers far more than just a happy picture of a puppy. And so we seek that out more and more. We create little bubbles, both by ourselves and who we engage with online, but as well, the algorithm knows this and feeds us information more and more that walks us down a path. And before we know it, we are focused almost exclusively on the darkest and most fear-based information that we can, right? We've all been there. And so that's why it's so important to be aware of your emotions, especially when you're engaging on social media. Because the goal of social media is to hook you emotionally so that you doom scroll for hours and hours and eventually, hopefully, click on an ad. Now, other types of energy traps that are pretty obvious are things like video games, movies, TV, and other sources of media. Now, video games is something a lot of people in our generation struggle with. They're highly creative, very engaging, and very fun. And they give you a sense of accomplishment, of achievement. You know, when you're grinding out something for hours and you finally hit that new level or unlock that thing, it's very stimulating and rewarding. Game makers know this, and it's called gamification, and it's something that's applied to most technology universally now. And gamification is basically just code or a different word for hacking the reward centers of the brain so that you continue to go down a path. And so while things like video games, there's nothing bad about them, we can see that an average game is 50, 100 hours to beat. You know, what could we achieve with that 50, 100 hours? Well, definitely a lot. And so if you're engaging in these types of things, really ask yourself, what is this giving me versus what is it taking? I think now, especially in a crazy world, we do need ways to escape and kind of turn off. And while things like meditation or prayer or exercise are good, I think there may be a place for social media and things like games and movies. I love sci-fi movies. They're really great. And I'm always looking for the secret messages. But with all of these things, more and more it siphons our energy. And a couple months ago, as an experiment, I decided to cut off all social media, movies, and screens except for work or to text friends. And it was amazing. I started exercising more, I was reading, I was thinking more deeply, I started meditating 2 hours a day, I started a little side business, I was sleeping better. Everything was actually incredible. It was blown away. And then the day I went back onto Twitter was World War III. And so I've been doom scrolling ever since. Yeah, but I can tell you from personal experience, it's really, really healthy to get off these things. If it's something that you're on regularly, just try a week. If you can't do a week, start with a day or two. And it's very rewarding. And don't just have the absence of these things. Actively try to do something positive. So I'm not going to go on these screens, and I'm going to hike, and I'm going to call that friend, or whatever. But this is something we need to be very aware of in modern times, because there's been an infinite amount of very cleverly engineered energy traps set up for us. For example, on Netflix alone, there's over 4 years of content. It's incredible, right? And there's hundreds of these platforms sucking our time, offering us endless distractions at all moments. And so we got to guard against that as much as we can. Social media and all that often gets the blame, right? We get it. But where are the less obvious energy traps? If you notice, there are a fair amount of people that are in a perpetual state of drama in their lives, in their relationships. Almost every day or every week, there's something new that's setting them off, that's pulling them full tilts into worry, anxiety, fear, anger, depression. And I've had some of these friends, and it can be very exhausting because in each individual event, you help and support them, right? Of course we want to as good friends. But you see the pattern play out over months and years, and eventually you have to come to the conclusion that there's nothing I can really do for these people. They are in this state perpetually. And to be clear, I don't think everybody or nearly anybody has fully overcome this. We all have this mechanism at play in our lives. I believe it's just a matter of degree. And the more we bring awareness and the more we actively pull ourselves out of environments and situations like that, we can see almost immediately the benefit. But why would somebody want to engage in drama, in negativity? Are they bad people? Are they psychopaths? Not really. The issue is something that is deep to the human experience, namely that we are fiends for drama, right? Positive stimulation and negative stimulation triggers the same reward centers in our brains. And so we don't really care where it comes from often. We can utilize or hack this in our own minds to not play into negative energy traps and again rewire us that positive, productive, helpful, nourishing activities trigger that in us. But we all have a piece of that within our lives, and so it's very important to be aware. A better and maybe more exaggerated example of this would be victim consciousness. So victim consciousness has many manifestations and many permutations, but it's very common in our society. In fact, within all of us, I believe we have identities of victimhood. And this is something that is a huge barrier that we need to overcome. So for example, in the political space, almost all of the dialogue in the truther community is about how badly oppressed we are, how bad these people are, all of the bad things they're doing to us. And that gives us a sense of entitlement. We then feel almost a release that we are a victim, we are hard done by. Now, why would anybody want to engage in victim ideology? It's because it gives you, first and foremost, a sense of identity and superiority. Now, it might be subtle, but you'll see it in your own life. X person did something bad to me. I am a victim. I need special treatment. And I now have special rights, right? I am a victim, and as a result, I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. I should be acknowledged and separate from other people because of what has happened to me. It's a destructive path because then you start going out into the world feeling yourself to be a victim, and you start engaging and reacting. And at first, you might get that positive, quote unquote, stimulation back, where people start saying, you're right, you are very hard done by. Like, I'm so sorry, something should be done. We should take care of you. We should give you special privileges or special attention or all of these things. And that gives the person a dopamine hit. They feel better. They feel a sense of relief from their trap of victim consciousness. But it's short-lived. Eventually that attention goes away. And what's left is that identity that you have attached yourself to, which is me as a victim. which then lowers your state of consciousness, right? You can't be in a high state of consciousness if you feel yourself to be a victim. And so then the cycle repeats, where you go out into the world complaining about the wrongs that have been done to you to seek attention and validation, which in turn then reinforces the fact that you are a victim, and the cycle goes on and on and on. Now, it's important to differentiate between victim consciousness and someone that has gone through something bad. I believe we need to support people through tough times. And we're living in a world where oftentimes we don't see justice, where we see perceived injustices done to us and done to our countrymen with no real remedy. So it's a very challenging thing to do. But if we enable ourselves to define ourselves by receiving injustices, by the wrong that's been done to them, we're actually enabling them, because they won't be able to fully self-actualize, to heal, to overcome, until they fully accept that, hey, this bad thing was done to me. Some of it was my fault, some of it wasn't, but I'm not going to be defined by this. I'm going to move on. So we can see this play out everywhere, right? When conservatives talk about the woke agenda, this is a very clear example where people will identify with some past trauma or wrong or evil that has been done to either them personally or their group collectively, and then essentially lobby governments and media to then reinforce that and make it law. But we also see this very much within the truther community. We see people who are constantly complaining about all of the bad things that the guys in suits far away are doing to us in our lives. And then we complain about it, and those who complain the most get the most views, get the most clicks, get the most attention. And while, yes, it is very good to bring attention to issues, if you're honest with yourself, you can see the pattern repeating and repeating. There is really no end to it. And I think this is the root cause of why many truthers, frankly, we struggle with depression and sadness and anxiety. It's because A, we are hyper-focused on all of the bad things in the world, but then also B, we are identifying either subtly or not so subtly as victims. And so it's very important to bring awareness to this and then ask yourself, who do you want to be? Do you just want to be somebody who is a victim of evil and government schemes and psyops and information? Or do you want to be somebody who isn't defined by that acknowledges that, yes, these things are happening, but most of it is by my consent and the energy I place on focusing on these things constantly? And instead, what I can do is do something better. I can focus on creating the best life for me. Sharing information is very important, but I've realized a while ago that a lot of people aren't ready to see. And so more information for those people isn't going to help them. I'll always be there for them, and if they ever question something, I'll be there in a heartbeat. But most of the engagement on social media is just reinforcing our narratives and the fact that we're all victims of some evil plot, with almost no focus on what can we practically do in our own lives to build a better world. Many people don't even ask what that is. If you ask truthers in the community, say in Canada, what would be your ideal? It would be no trust in Trudeau, or I want Pierre in, or I want Maxime in. But that's not really a dream or a vision. That's just saying what you don't want. For me, on a national level, I want people to be able to self-determine. I want people to rise up and build a system through populism and through hard work and through morality that we would all be proud of. I see the potential within Canada and within the world. Humans are largely good people. We have the capacity to build incredible things together. And so if we develop a movement or a mindset collectively that instead of just complaining about what we don't want and perpetuating that victim mentality, that we're people who say, Our goal in life is to build the best life we can for ourselves, for our family, for our community, and to plant seeds and create better visions of what we can achieve. Energy traps are something we all need to be aware of because we all engage with them in one degree or another. They're very similar to abusive relationships. Now, in terms of abusive relationships, we always chastise and punish the abuser, as we should. But lesser discussed is the cycle of abuse that, after a while, definitely takes both parties to perpetuate. Now, I've had several friends that have gone through abusive relationships, and it's very upsetting. But they typically tell me that at first, the person they met was very exciting. They were thrilling. They weren't like others. They were risk takers. And then eventually abuse happened during a fight. Then the first time it was very disconcerting, but the person comforted them, and then they went back to their exciting self. Now, it wasn't always the exact same. Obviously, there was still a little tension, but it was still good. And then abuse came again. And eventually, you've been worn down to the point when you don't even think you're worthy of leaving. You're scared, you're terrified, your sense of self is totally diminished, and the person seems scarier and scarier to you. And so I say this to point out that many of us are in abusive relationships, whether that be government or social media, or even how we look at the world. But if you really want to grow up and heal as a human, you need to realize that to play at this game, there cannot be an abuser without a victim. And we've been trained from a young age to get into victim consciousness and to think that somebody outside of ourselves needs to save us, right? If you start to see the role that you are playing in constantly giving these things your energy and time and attention versus opting out of paying attention to negative, evil things and instead focusing at least most of your attention on doing something positive that's going to benefit you and your community, you can break that cycle of abuse. In the marketing world, they say all publicity is good publicity. And that roughly means that even if people hate us, they're talking about us. They're giving their energy and attention. And that helps things come to fruition that otherwise wouldn't. And so this really is a core tenet that I'm hoping to promote with people. You know, it's not as easy or rewarding at first. It's much easier to get that quick hit of dopamine by spamming something negative. You know, X person did something evil. Oh my God, right? But this is honestly where we need to go if we are to actually change things for the better. So I hope, guys, that this has been helpful. I'd really love to know your thoughts on this. And if you're open to sharing, share in your life where you've become aware of energy traps and what you're doing to overcome them. And I would put the challenge to all of you that if you want to change the world for the better, you got to realize that we have to also change ourselves in the process. And we have to, instead of just being reactive to the things in our environment, we have to be proactive. So I hope that planted some seeds in my own life. This was something that was very difficult to accept and to see, but once I have become more aware of these process and these cycles and patterns, it's been very rewarding in that I've been able to break a lot of these spells and live a better life. So thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I want to thank everybody who's been supporting me so far. You guys have been lovely, sending me lots of messages. It's really inspiring, and I hope together we can build something great. So please like, subscribe, share with all your friends, and tune into the next episode. Cheers.